sounded like this. And ascending was pretty much the same thing, except starting on the first finger. It also has a little bit of the triplet in there. But we're just arranging the notes so that it works out to be a 16th note pattern. Here's another example using a fragment that includes string skipping. Now with this one, instead of moving up the neck, playing 3 notes per string, I stayed in the same position because it facilitates skipping strings without having to do any position changes. So instead of having to go something awkward like that, we're staying in the same position. So the scale shape I'm doing has a repeated E, but we don't really hear that repeated E because we're skipping strings. Here's the pattern slow. Let's just do one more 16th note pattern through a scale, once again using one of the fragments that we learned earlier. Here it is slow. See if you can recognize the fragments in this one. Okay, now that we have all the scalar technique under our hands, let me show you how this can be applied to improvising. I'm going to solo over progression in D minor, basically using D Dorian and D minor scales, and I'm going to throw in a couple of these 16th note runs, and you can see the way it interacts with the melodies and whatnot. And once you get a taste of this, maybe you can try it in your own solos. When I first started playing, I probably had some of the same typical influences that kids my age had. It's like Black Sabbath and Zeppelin and The Who and Iron Maiden, and then I started to get more drawn towards the guitar players. And as I played more, I was drawn to players that really had unique style. I was really into Rush and Alex Lifeson and Steve Howe with Yes, Randy Rhoads, and then I finally discovered Steve Morse, and my life changed. I heard the Bash for the first time, and I was just like, this is unreal. Got every Dregs album, and started getting into Steve and the Dregs, and Al Di Meola and Alan Holdsworth. I had a similar experience here in Stevie Ray Vaughan for the first time, like just blown away. One of the more difficult techniques for most guitarists is using alternate picking through arpeggios. Now this has been something that's been difficult for me for a while, and it's actually making me kind of mad, so I analyzed what the problem was, and I came up with an interesting little fact. First of all, the problem always seemed to arise when I was encountering what I call inside the string picking. Now that to me is really difficult because it seems like your pick is kind of trapped in between these two strings, as opposed to playing on the outside of the strings like this, where it feels like you have a bit more freedom of motion. To experiment and see if this is a problem for you, I suggest playing two notes on adjacent strings, let's say A on the G string and D on the B string, and first try picking them starting with a downstroke and then with an upstroke. And let's see how that feels. Try it at various tempos, see how fast you can get it. Now do the same thing, but start on an upstroke and go up, down, up, down. You're going to encounter that inside of the string picking phenomena. Let's try that. Now my right hand immediately starts to tense up as soon as I encounter that inside of the string technique, and I think it's because I feel like I'm sort of trapped and I have no range of motion. This is usually a problem for most guitar players. Some guys have this taken care of, and we'll have to shoot them all. But anyway, how do you practice this? How do you get around this? Well, very simply, you just practice the motion that you're having a problem with. Now, this could be very boring if you sit there doing that for any period of time that's going to make it effective. So what I've done is I've come up with a little etude that practices and concentrates on the inside of the string picking.